Sacred attention therapy is an approach to liberation. The first liberation is from the conditioned self, psychology of early life. The second liberation is from the realization of the true nature, the fulfillment of oneself as a personality. And the third liberation is the liberation into the life of spirituality and spiritual practice. Sacred attention therapy, or SAT, is a meta-psychology because it embraces not only the physical, emotional, mental and energetic aspects of the human being, but also the spiritual and the transcendental. Therefore, it is uniquely placed to be an applied psychology through counselling and psychotherapy in the 21st century, in which human beings are more complex than ever before.
Welcome to the fifth in a series of online interviews with Richard Harvey. My name is Rob Meager. Today's interview will discuss the lecture Spiritual Baptism from the Hsüan Hsüeh Discourses. This lecture is available in written form in Bodhi Ocean, an ebook that is available on the books page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website. You can listen to the full recording of many of these lectures on the lectures page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website. And lastly, you can view many other interviews on the videos page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website and our YouTube channel. The URL for our website is www.sacredattentiontherapy.com. And on our website, you can click on the YouTube channel icon to view our YouTube channel. And now a little bit of background about Richard Harvey. Richard is a psychospiritual psychotherapist and spiritual teacher. His work emerged out of the human potential movement of the 1970s. He trained with many teachers in humanistic and transpersonal approaches. He's the founder of Sacred Attention Therapy, a radical new approach for the 21st century that proposes a three-stage model of human awakening. Richard is the author of Hsüan, among many other publications. He works with people all around the world, and his soon-to-be published book is entitled Your Sacred Calling. It's now my pleasure to welcome to the interview Richard Harvey. Welcome and good to be with you, Richard.
Thank you, Rob.
Spiritual Baptism, the title of this lecture, it incorporates the Taoist story of the useless tree, Martin Buber's Itch and Do, and then your teachings come in on the topic of deep spirituality. And you open the lecture with the useless tree story, which I would like to recite for those watching and listening, and then that allow us to lead into the interview today. The story, as you tell it in the lecture, goes like this. A carpenter was walking along one day when he happened upon a tree. It was so big it could have sheltered 1,000 oxen. It was wide and broad, and it towered over the hill behind it. Each of its 10 branches could have been used to make a boat. Many came to see it and shelter in its shade and have picnics and dance, sing, and spend the day. The carpenter, however, didn't give it a second look, but went on his way. Later, when he had stopped for the night, he remarked, that tree is useless. If you made a boat from it, it would sink. If you made a coffin from it, it would rot. If you made furniture from it, it would fall apart. If you made a door from it, it would be covered in seeping sap. If you made a pillar from it, it would be full of worms in no time. The wood is useless and good for nothing. That is why it is so huge. That is why it has survived and lived so long. On the carpenter's return trip, the tree appeared to him in a dream and asked, "What are you comparing me with? Ornamental fruit trees? The hawthorn, the pear tree, the orange tree, citrus, gourds, and other fruit trees? Their fruits are taken when they are ripe, and then the tree suffers. The big branches get damaged, and the small ones are broken off. Because of their usefulness, they suffer. Their life is shortened, and their usefulness is the reason. It is like this with all things. For a long time I have studied the way of uselessness. Even so, on a handful of occasions I was nearly destroyed. Now I have perfected the art of uselessness, and it is very useful to me. How, if I had been useful, could I have grown so big and lived for so long? You and I, carpenter, we are merely things. How can we make such statements about one another? How can you, a useless man, who will soon die, know anything about me, a useless tree?" I feel from this story that there's many lessons to be learned. But I wanted to ask you, what is this story of the useless tree inviting into our understanding and our awareness? What is it telling us?
Hsüan Hsüeh is a great spiritual master. He won't be reduced to the rational. He's, one of my heroes, as you probably know. He doesn't speak to the intellect alone. He doesn't even speak to the heart alone. He speaks in a multi-layered way, the direct truth. So in any one of his stories, I suggest you can run it by someone and maybe say, what do you think of that? And probably you'll have a fairly clear idea of their psychological, spiritual development from a single story alone. It's a kind of diagnostic in a way. I suggest this fantastic story, wonderful story, imparts to us the great wisdom that we are not human beings. It's a difficult one. You and I, all the people listening, 7.5 billion and some organisms, entities here on the planet today masquerading as human beings are in fact consciousness, not just in a plurality, but everybody individually is total consciousness. This is the ancient teachings from spirituality from Egypt, from the ancient Indus Valley. It's very hard to stomach, of course. It's very hard to accept. But in it lies your freedom. Because if you're a human being, and you're born and you die, and whatever transpires in between, that's all you've got going. Why bother? Why? Hopelessness or pleasure or whatever side of the middle. But in fact, we're not human beings. We're masquerading as human beings. In fact, flowers are masquerading as flowers, and trees and animals and clouds and stones and mountains and paths and horses and sheep are masquerading as forms of arising consciousness in the field of space and time. It's a big one. And so Hsüan Hsüeh uses the tree analogy, and he says, the tree says apparently to the carpenter, I've been here a long time, can just no use, just no good. The practical world of doing and accomplishment and results is all, of course, predicated on the fact that you and I have a body. It's the same for animals. Because we have a body, we have to do things in order to survive. We have to nourish the body, we have to breathe and hunt or go to the shop or, do all these things and have a house, have a car, and all these things turn out to be predicated on the human being status. And again, if that's all we were, etc., then the practical, useful world that the carpenter evokes in the story is all there is. But of course, wonderful thing, you and I are entirely useless. In a few minutes of cosmic time, we won't be here. As individuated consciousness, as a single organism, and it won't matter. I mean, why would it matter? We're just not that important. Even if we're great people, and there's been many apparently great people, what does it matter? Have they really shifted anything much? You can look back in history and say, well, there's been killings, there have been enlightenments, there have been mass, this, that, and the other movements in philosophy and religion and even spirituality, and none of it's of any use whatsoever. None of it's made any difference whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Spirituality, then, in its essence, is the wise spiritual teaching, or the deepest spiritual teaching, is to expose the conviction that you are a human being and say, your consciousness, you're not a human being at all. You didn't even just wear a mask. You're just in disguise. Mm-hmm. And true spirituality has no function, you see, which is why we have to be very careful today when we're so practically minded that we've dodged religion to some degree. Perhaps several thousand of us, not that many, have dodged religion to some degree and embraced spirituality, or let's say the essence of religion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. However, many have then decided that religio spirituality, shall we say, should somehow be applied to the plight of the world, should have some use, should be practical in some sense. It's nonsensical. It's absolutely nonsensical, because in the spiritual realm there is no time, there is no space. You may just as well be here as there, as some other place, as 10,000 years ago or 10,000 years hence. Mm-hmm. Because the true spiritual event takes place in the divine domain. Mm-hmm. It's for real, but it's not for real in space and time, and it's not participated in by human beings. It's participated in by you in your essence, mm-hmm. which you could say is the light inside you that animates you. But it's not that human being who lives in fear of death, or in fear of not having shelter, or not having food or companionship and all of these things, you see. Mm-hmm. So this is the useless tree.
Flowing from the story of the useless tree and what you share about it in the lecture, and you've encapsulated it here, you share a very interesting perspective on the purpose of life, which I often find in spiritual milieu to be quite a hot topic, the purpose of life. It seems to be a perennial question for many people. And just a very brief quote from your lecture on this idea. You say, inner work, psychospiritual work, turns out to have a characteristic movement from outward and goal-oriented behavior and endeavor to in-turned experience and process, or stillness-oriented behavior and endeavor. The journey is from doing to being, from having to relinquishing, from thinking to being. Even the very idea of purpose is forfeited. Life has no purpose. It is what it really is, and that is the mystery, the great mystery. It is not something to possess or do something with or improve or propagate. You simply are it. Forms may come and go, appear and dissolve, but the stillness remains. End quote. So my question is, well, if life has no purpose, what's the point of living? Why not just kill myself now?
Conversely, if you find purpose outside of what is happening in present time itself. In any other conditions or situations, we would find it circumspect or suspicious or somehow lacking. For example, if I marry somebody for the purpose of they're good looking and they would, it will make me look good to have them with me, or because they've got lots of money, or for some reason other than the relationship itself, then we're immediately thought to be suspect in some. I mean, rightly so. In the same way, when you engage with life, you engage with it on its own terms, which is, it is as it is. It just is. If you engage with life, and the same as if you engage with spirituality with the spiritual search, shall we say, with some kind of agenda, some kind of secondary thing other than the purity of the sadhana or the practice, the discipline itself, that, as we know, has to be stripped away. Not in what we call in sacred attention work first stage awakening. That's a different matter, and that's what we were talking about there, I think, when you quoted me from the lecture. We move from doing to being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we were taught to do. Our whole conditioning has externalized the awareness of people so that they are no longer self-referring, no longer have any sense of the source or the fount of wisdom. Mm-hmm. Love, compassion, authenticity within themselves. They are outwardly oriented. So mostly, to generalize, we're all involved with doing, we're involved in activity as a way of somehow justifying and validating us, and it happens from very early. You're lazy, or you're not doing enough schoolwork, or you're not doing the chores, or you're not reading the book, or something like this. So, for example, we stumble into a room and see somebody doing nothing. That's a strange thing, by and large, to the Western. Of course, if you live in an ashram or a samatha meditation contemplation is part of the culture, it's not a strange thing. But broadly speaking, if we come upon someone doing nothing, we say, "Are you okay? I mean, what's going on?" Maybe they're worried, maybe this, that, or the other. So we're involved with doing, we're conditioned to do, brought up to do and achieve and have ambitions. And I remember my own mother saying to me, when are you going to get your life together and do something? What she meant was get married, and have a proper profession and all these kinds of things. And because she didn't have any reference points for what it was I was doing, or neither did I particularly, but so it didn't look like much was going on a lot of the time, or it looked like it was somewhat ad hoc. It didn't appeal to her idea of directionality, or should we say purpose. The purpose of life is clear then. It is life itself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Enter into life itself. Embrace life itself. Life itself is a blessing. And in that blessing, you will experience life's purpose.
Beautiful. Switching gears a little bit to Martin Buber, we started talking about the Taoist story, The Useless Tree, but Martin Buber's contribution to the lecture is multifold. And one of Buber's philosophies that you integrate into the lecture is the I-thou relationship. And can you explain the I-thou relationship? Who is the I and who is the thou?
It's the phenomenon where I meet you not as the other, but I embrace you as myself. And I see that there's no difference between you and I, even while we are, so to say, masquerading as two arising forms of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So it's a meeting without separation inherent in it, without the division inherent in it, because we're not holding fast to identity as a means of separation or division. It's real relationship.
Mm-hmm. Now, this I-thou relationship you use to bring your own philosophy of the relationship of presence into the lecture, and you say the following on the topic of the relationship of presence. The relationship of presence has a complex connection to the continuum of usefulness and uselessness. This relationship has no purpose, although a purpose may be fulfilled through it. This relationship has no goal or aim, although goals and aims may be reached through it. This relationship has no meaning outside of itself, beyond itself, although meaning may be fulfilled through it. This relationship of deep stillness, teaching, love, compassion, and acceptance is the basis for my healing therapy. It is the basis for any truly healing therapy, and it should be mandatory training for counselors, therapists, and healers in whatever practice or discipline they follow. And so I wanted to ask you, Richard, what exactly is this relationship of presence?
It's common when people come to us for therapy, guidance, and healing that they haven't very often been in the presence of somebody who has the inner space to receive them. When you have that inner space to receive them, which takes some work because you have to yourself empty, and then you have to learn how to present that. And presence, of course, is the ability to be here and now. And usually a thought, feeling, a physical sensation, principally, take us away from being present, from being in the here and now. And then through that presence, emptiness isn't offered because, as we know, you and I know, you have a thought and that couples up with another thought, and even if you're there meditating, quarter of an hour later, you've had this wonderful movie or problem solving or planning or worrying, or there's a lot of words for it, but ultimately it's simply interior monkey mind, really, because you've decided to meditate or contemplate or even read or whatever it is, and your mind has hijacked your volition and taken you off because you're prone to that distraction, to that fascination. So this is something in spiritual practice, of course, that you work with simply to notice it and to gently guide yourself, not berate yourself, not punish yourself, not feel betrayed or anything like this, but you come back gently, and you then embrace presence, and through your presence, this emptiness can be presented, which can be filled then by the other person. Since healing takes place between two, and two are gathered together in the Lord's name, then it takes that to burn whatever it is that's being offered by the person who's come to you for guidance, healing, or therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Presence then is fundamental. Can I be present? And the answer, of course, should be almost bound to be no. Why is that? Because I'm hijacked by thoughts, by feelings, by physical sensations, all of them. What, how? You go into some detail and you find your pattern. I mean, the nice thing about it is it's not as ad hoc as all that. There is a format. And once you've got the program, you understand that this leads to this and this leads to that, and you know yourself well as a mental, emotional, physical being. You'll understand exactly the way in which your awareness is hijacked. And then you can begin to retrieve it, to achieve presence through which you offer emptiness.
The title of the lecture, as we introduced it, is Spiritual Baptism. And you share a glimpse into this experience, and this is how I'd like to end the interview today. You say about spiritual baptism the following: spiritual baptism is being infilled with the divine. The spirit of the divinity is poured through you from the top of your head, the Sahasrara, or the Sahasrara, to the base of your spine, the Muladhara. The physical experience is ecstatic. The psychological experience is releasing and totally liberating. It can happen during a period of spiritual practice, and it may happen completely unexpectedly. Perhaps in the physical presence of a spiritual master in nature or in the middle of a busy street, it is utterly unpredictable. The feeling of homecoming is so profound that you are completely divorced from utilitarian life. Life as effort or striving disappears, and a profound inner peace fills you from within. You go on to say, when your life becomes transparent to the spirit of the divine, every word, gesture, movement, attitude, thought, feeling, sigh, touch, sense, and resonance is filled with truth. This truth pervades the universes. It is the immutable reality of existence, the pure love-filled substance of the noumena present in the sphere of space-time. There is only one sane, genuine, spontaneous, appropriate response to the world, to life, to the realm of appearances and reflected light. That response is reverence, honorable gratitude, and openness and receptivity, yielding to the devotional response of heart-filled gratitude for the blessing of the divine, the baptism of the Spirit, the infilling oneness of the source reality and truth of the divinity. And so my question, Richard, to end the interview is the experience of spiritual baptism of this world?
In the New Testament, we have this idea. Do you remember John the Baptist baptizes by water, and he says the one who will come after me will baptizes with fire. There are, so to say, grades of this experience of spiritual baptism that will occur in the field of space-time. And we're coming in now from the cold, as it were. We're coming out of the... Let's always remember that ritual is ritual in the sense of the outer events are there to invoke, not merely evoke, but to invoke experience, or even a experience, which is to say beyond experience. So we start with a ritual, say the external spiritual baptism, which is a symbol to remind us of something that's real. And then through your sadhana or through your spiritual practice, you can have these kinds of deepening experiences of being infilled with spirit in one way or another. I came to consider many of mine merely psychological, human, experiential events. Whereas I have to say, at the time, when I was in my 20s, for example, I considered them exalted spiritual events. Looking back now, I don't see them that way at all. I think it was a expanded human beingness, and it's become very important to me, as I think you know, to distinguish between exalted psychological events and spiritual events per se. And perhaps the main difference to emphasize here is that spiritual events are not an experience. The reason they're not an experience is that experience applies to the relative plane. There's something that happens and finishes, for example, and you will have exclusively physical, or at least psychophysical, emotive experience of the event, whatever it is. A real spiritual event occurs in divine domain, so it participates in eternity. So it's not an experience, because it doesn't start and it doesn't finish. What you feel is much more like, if you were to, and this is why these metaphors work so well, it's as if you join the river. Maybe you come out of the river a little way down, but the river's still going on. So you don't have this feeling in memory when you've had a spiritual experience, or direct apprehension of truth, or becoming one with the flow of the divine, that you sort of activated something and you kind of didn't. It's far more like you fell into something which was eternally present, and now you're in this sort of black and white place which just isn't so extraordinary, isn't so vivid, isn't so full of light and consciousness. So spiritual baptism, in truth, is an event outside of space-time, so not strictly an event at all, where you fall into the flow or you enter the divine domain. You are always, constantly, truly in an eternal moment.
Mm.
While you masquerade in this idea that, morning and evening, and where's my dinner, and, I'm going to have my bath, it's bath night or something, and then get into my car, and also, even while all this sort of cartoon is going on, you and I are in this one single moment with no utilitarian reason or purpose or even progress, or it's no use to anything. You see, it just is the truth, and it's self-sourcing, and it is reality itself, without which none of these other things would really have any purpose in and of themselves, because they don't really. They just sustain the body through one day, 1 week, 1 month, and year, and lifetime, one after the other. So what in themselves? But when they are considered as an opportunity to be transparent to light and consciousness, now you have a life that's living in you. The eternal lives through you, and you are surrendered to truth and reality. Nothing then can be a source of despair, and nothing can be purposeless. It's enormously purposeful in and of itself, no secondary purpose, and it's full of blessing. And every moment, this one moment that's reflected, so to speak, into the temporal realm, is an opportunity for gratitude and reverence. What else? It's spontaneous. It's a reverential business life.
Nice way to leave it, Richard. Thank you for being with us today and talking about spiritual baptism, and we'll continue on with the Hsüan Hsüeh Discourses when we come together the next time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Bye for now.